we have a guest whose work has profoundly shaped the landscape of Native American children and young adult literature. Her stories offer a vibrant, authentic representation of Indigenous experiences, taking us on journeys that explore identity, culture, and resilience. From the heartfelt portrayal of a young Native American girl's struggles in Rain Is Not My Indian Name, to the thrilling paranormal world of the Tantalized series, and the poignant exploration of activism and racism in Hearts Unbroken. Her work continues to be a beacon for diverse storytelling. As she continues to craft narratives that resonate across generations, it is with great excitement that I welcome Cynthia Leitich Smith. Harvest House blends supernatural elements with contemporary issues. What was your inspiration for the story, and are there any books from your childhood that influenced your approach to writing this novel? How do you see Harvest House contributing to the genre of Native American literature?
On a personal level, the initial spark of Harvest House stemmed from a college experience. My cousin and I took our mothers to a commercial haunted house in downtown Kansas City. And it occurred to me at the time that that sort of place it's terrific for a safe scare, the kind of place that you would go with friends, knowing that all of the scariness is make-believe. And I wondered, what if one of these make-believe houses of horror was actually haunted? And that in turn, over time, led to the question of, well, then who might the ghost be and what their role might be in the story? I had a character from a previous book, Hearts Unbroken, named Huey Wolf. Huey is the little brother of the protagonist, and he was a theater kid. I knew that I wanted to write a story about him, and it occurred to me that he could transfer a lot of the skills he had in the theater, like set design and performance, to a haunted house setting. So I decided to focus a story on him and really interweave it with a narrative that would take on the critical topic of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and our two-spirit relatives. It's a YA on the younger side of the YA span, and I wanted to kind of come at it from a different slant. So many books that have addressed this issue, all of them important and necessary, coming from fellow Indigenous women, have looked at more of the murder aspect. And I wanted to kind of flip that and look at the role of the media and failures of law enforcement in these cases. That way I could give my young characters, through student theater and journalism, venues to raise their own voices in a way that would be empowering and proactive, so they wouldn't only be working at it as a community of victims, but a community of heroes who are rising to take care of and protect their own.
As a member of Authors Against Banned Books, how do you see your book, Blue Stars, The Vice Principal Problem, where the vice principal wants to cut funding to the school library, contributing to the conversation on the importance of access to diverse narratives? Do you feel that the protagonist's love for her library within the story illustrates this better than any talking points? And how crucial is it to ensure these narratives reach the kids who need them most?
So much of the dialogue around any sort of literary conflict, banned books, library funding, the role of libraries in schools, access, the need for diversity, erasure of entire identities, comes in generalizations. We have a lot of people on one side saying kids want, kids need, kids shouldn't. And what they're really talking about in many cases is their own child. And we have others likewise speaking in generalities. What gets lost in that conversation is the real world impact on individual kids. And while these are systems at work, and the system must be part of the solution, the individual child in each of these cases is the one who feels it, and the way they feel it is idiosyncratic. A kid like Maya, who is an aspiring inventor and very gifted in STEM, is looking for Nonfiction is looking for books that speak to topics that she's passionate about, that might highlight the history of engineering, or point out to her fellow women inventors, or Black inventors, or simply people interested in aerospace the way that she is. And that information is crucial for her as a person, as someone with hopes and dreams who needs to be validated and lifted up and encouraged by her educational institution. Some of those books will be what we might think of as mainstream. Others will be what we think of as diverse. Certainly, Black women in the sciences have faced systemic barriers over time. There's no denying it. She'll need to understand all of that to navigate her own path successfully. If we look at it in terms of the actual child, and we think about really wanting all of our children to have a fully rounded and positive educational experience, we're going to have to think about them both as groups, but also as individual kids who will someday be the leaders of our society. At the same time, speaking of leaders, most social movements have been fueled by young people, children and teenagers. They are the change agents, and they are most equipped to speak to this one because they have the energy, right? There isn't the warness of cynicism over time or self-defeat. 2, they have the most at stake. They're going to have to live with whatever the situation is. And 3, they can come at whatever our challenges might be with fresh and new ideas. Plus, with each passing generation, there is more of a sense that it's not my children and your children, it's our children. And especially when you're talking about kids from marginalized communities, that's only going to be more prescient as folks move into the society and find their niche, their passion, the place where their voice belongs.
On a Wing and a Tear introduces readers to a world filled with adventure and imagination. What inspired you to create this story, and how does it differ from your previous works in terms of tone and theme?
Wing and a Tear is modern folklore. So by that, I mean that it is drawn and honors Muskogee traditional stories and storytelling techniques. So when I say this, I'm talking about the old stories. In this case, the story of a big ball game between the birds and the animals that featured a small player named Bat, who was able to make a difference because Bat had wings and teeth to catch the ball and fly to victory. What does that story tell us? It tells us that even though you're little, you can make a difference. It says we must value the little ones. It says that we can't count someone out because their gifts are not like our gifts. They may have something of their own, and regardless, they all belong because we are all related in those families, right? We must take care of and include one another in meaningful ways. So you take a story like that, you put it in a modern setting, in this case, a household with 2 kids who are essentially living as siblings. Ray is living with his granddad. They are a Cherokee Seminole family. Mel is living with her mom. They're renting out the attic in the house, and they are a Muskogee and Ottawa family. For a long time, I thought about being a Muskogee Cherokee and about the legacy of the Trail of Tears, and to a large extent, the absence of that pivotal and tragic historical event in the body of literature. At the same time, I am in some ways a fantastical writer, a more comedic writer. And so to write a story of trauma and tragedy, however important that writers may do it, and I highly recommend Andrea Rogers' Mary and the Trail of Tears. It's lovely and heartfelt and brilliant. My role in that conversation would need to be different, right? We need to think about where can our voice be most effective to serve this all-important audience of young readers. So I decided to tell a modern story of coming home to the ancestral lands and the healing that could come with it, not minimizing the past, but also saying that the past does not define us forever. We don't have to always live in that place of pain. We can also move forward because we are people with a past and a present, yes, but also a future. For our Indigenous children, we must emphasize to them that they are not of peoples who went extinct hundreds of years ago. They are peoples who will be here on this continent, on their home forever, and their ancestral land is still where their ancestors are waiting to welcome them home.
You mentioned certain techniques used to write on a wing and a tear. Do you mind describing some of those techniques that you borrowed when writing this book?
Certainly. I mean, definitely there is the reference to the traditional storytelling mode juxtaposed and interwoven with contemporary storytelling mode. But there is also a strong sense of a storyteller's voice in the narrative. There are techniques like direct address. The echoes of the words chosen are not my grandparents, our great-grandparents, but certainly you can hear the pacing, the intonation. There's an emphasis on daily life that you often see in Indigenous storytelling. Sometimes you'll find what almost seems to be anecdotal pieces, but when you combine them in the whole, you can see how all the parts fit together and resonate. So, I would say it's thematically very much rooted in Indigenous values. It is rooted in Indigenous storytelling technique, but also in kind of a celebration of where our entire conversation of books is now. There was a time not that long ago, maybe the early 2010s, when I was the only Native woman who was published by a major trade house. And I would pull a stunt, basically. I would go into a theater room as a keynote speaker, and it would be packed with children's literature teachers, librarians, university professors, people who really knew the books. And I would, give my introduction, and I would hit a point, and I would say to them about the need for representation. And I would ask them to raise their hand if they had read a young adult novel by a Native author. And every hand would go up because they had probably read Joseph Bruchac or Sherman Alexie or Tim Tingle. I told them to lower their hands if the only Native author that they had read was a man. And about half of the hands would go straight down, which, okay, was not great for my ego, but I'll take that other half that has read my books too. And then I said, put your hands down if that author is me. And there wouldn't be a hand up. It'd be hundreds of people who all really knew children's books, some young adult books. And I would say, keep your hands down if you've ever thought about that before. Hands would stay down. I was like, raise your hand if you'll be thinking about it from now on. Boom, every hand in the room would go up, right? And now, because of the work of We Need Diverse Books and leaders like Danelle Clayton and Ellen O and in-house folks like Rosemary Brosnan, the editor I'm working with at my Heart Drum imprint, we have names like Andrea Rogers and Angela Bully and Sherry Dimmeline. And really, it has been a sea change since 2014. It really has been remarkable, and it's such a blessing to be a part of that conversation. And also, I have girlfriends I can talk to about my books who are writing on similar themes and think about some of the same things in terms of how we represent our aunties and the cousins and the unks and all of those people. And it has been remarkable. And I think that it also has given us permission in some ways, not that we should have needed it, but maybe it was necessary from an industry standpoint to write in more Indigenous styles, as opposed to try to force Indigenous content into a Western framework. And sometimes the Western framework is right. When I wrote Sisters of the Neversea, it's a Peter Pan retelling. I was going to meet J.M. Barrie on his own playing ground. But for stories like On a Wing and a Tear, those really are wholly ours. And we need to be careful about the compromises that we make while still creating a narrative that can be accessible to all young readers and invite them all into the storytelling circle.
Across your career, you've worked on a wide range of projects, from anthologies like Ancestor Approved to your recent book, Blue Stars. How do you balance curating stories that reflect Native cultures with your individual creative projects?
So first, for those who aren't familiar with it, I am the author curator of an imprint called Heart Drum at Harper Children's. And at Heart Drum, we publish primarily contemporary stories centered on young Native heroes, picture books, chapter books, middle grade, and young adult, mostly fiction, and stories that are really, we do publish some stories that are maybe a celebration of concept, like Rock Your Mocks is a celebration of Rock Your Mocks Day and different kids participating in it. But most of them are stories of individual kids who are who are heroes of their own life stories. So that is a lot. We have, 8, 9 books coming out a year, more in the future. And so I'm always reading and offering developmental assistance to our writers, especially the newest of voices, looking over marketing materials and talking to Rosemary Brosnan, who is the in-house editor, legendary editor, who does the heavy lifting with all of the business stuff and the genius editorial work. And it's a full load, but I love it. It's important to me. I'm passionate about it. I've often joked that one of my goals was to make myself a little less rare and valuable, in the sense that I should be really replaceable. There should be so many people whose voices are, not exactly like mine, of course, because we are all unique, but also speaking to many of the same themes and life ways. How do I balance that with being an author? I don't even try. I don't know that balance is really achievable. I feel like my attitude is more along the lines of go with the flow. If I am on deadline, the deadline is on fire. I just got back from Vermont, where I was revising the script for Blue Stars #3 with my co-author, Kekla Magoon. That had to be the priority because we were getting the script to Molly Murakami to illustrate, to make that deadline and series have tighter deadlines. Now that I'm back, I'm looking at submissions. I'm trying to get them back in a timely manner. I just had the privilege of doing a read of Byron Graves' follow-up to his award-winning debut Resball, and his sophomore novel is going to be fantastic, and I had the chance to read that several times. So it's whatever needs to be done in that moment, and you just sort of ride with it. There is a rhythm to it. It's kind of hard to explain. And, when everything does for some reason come crashing together at the same time, I'm just really honest with everyone in my life. And I'll say, hey, I have to go be that Cynthia for the following however many days, but then you will be right there on the top of the pile, and I will get back to you as soon as possible so that everyone knows what page we're on and nobody's left feeling like they're just hanging in the air.
You've received numerous awards and accolades through your career. Has this recognition influenced your approach to your more recent works like Harvest House or On a Wing and a Tear? If so, how?
I'm always shocked when I win an award. It's always such a surprise because you don't think about it, right? Or I don't think about it when I'm working on a project. The focus is really, how will this narrative serve my young audience? How will it be the best that I can make it because they deserve the very best? What do I need to think about that's idiosyncratic to their age level developmentally? What might be a heightened sensitivity that I need to really ponder the nuances? For example, when I was working on Harvest House, there are absolutely kids who are reading that book who have been personally touched by, maybe they lost a sister or an auntie or their mom. I want that experience for them to be healing, not one that opens up old wounds. I want that experience for them to be uplifting, not one that puts them in a place of grief and mourning in a way that is not healthy. There's so much psychology that goes into it, but it all has to stem from this deep love and respect for the audience. Awards and honors I'm always genuinely grateful. What I do think that they can do is provide validation to the publisher that in being inclusive of voices like mine, they're making a decision that will be accepted by the marketplace and the thought leaders in it. They can help raise awareness of books, which puts them in the hands of more kids and teens. And that in turn can, on the most crass but pragmatic level, it can increase the numbers of books that are purchased so that someone like me and my authors can continue to make an argument that there is an audience for our work. And it's not just idiosyncratic to each of us. When someone goes to a publisher acquisitions committee with, say, a chapter book, they can say, Indian Shoes by Cynthia Leitich Smith has been in print for X number of years, has received these awards and honors, is included in the curriculum. Therefore, we know that there is a market for books like this chapter book by this new voice. So it sounds a little bit like playing three-dimensional chess, and that's true, but we have to both honor our art, take care of our audience, and recognize that we're trying to navigate a real world industrial construct.
Your stories not only entertain, but also foster understanding and respect for Native cultures. We're excited to see the continued impact of your work in highlighting Indigenous voices. Thank you for your ongoing contributions to literature and for amplifying stories that truly matter.